fix that one tweak I had? Because the sentence is very, very strange. Like you were demanding that they do reviews.
I added the police at the end.
Okay. So you want to leave it like
Yeah,
that? Okay. I was just thinking that how can we ask?
So where do you want to change it?
And I was just going to say, trying to review at least one other document. This is a volunteer.
No, don't try it. Yeah.
Okay, leave it like this.
And,
Okay.
Usually looking
Okay, leave it then. Leave it. I understand now.
Make it up.
Okay, leave it.
Review documents in your work group, at least one other document
Okay.
from another.
Yes, that makes it much better because it's a volunteer group, right? And it looks like we're changing the rules or something that they now have to review, right?
So, do we need to do anything special for it to show up there?
Maybe the projector's not on? You want to sign one?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Someone had their coffee already. This is the Rtgarea open meeting. As soon as we go past the red screen of death, we'll start. Yeah.
It's the timer. It's coming.
Just died.
Why not? John, you're taking a minute. I was wondering what was so funny. Here we go. It's done.
Now we lost everything.
Maybe I get it going. We need to just start like reading them off them online, and I'll get pick them up.
Sure.
I think they should have with it. Yeah, they could do iPads and stuff. This is all.
Yeah, I know. So, we don't know what's going on with the computer. In the meantime, this is the routing area open meeting. All the slides are online. Maybe you can follow there. I'm just going to start talking. We have enough time today to start a little late. The agenda is basically three things that we're going to talk about. We're going to do the administrivia, of course, of the state of the area first. By the way, I'm Alvaro. This is Deborah, and Aaliyah took the longest path to get here today. So she should be here in a second. Then we have a couple of the ANRP winners giving their talk here today. The ANRP is the Advanced Networking Research Prize that the IETF gives out. And this time, both winners did routing work. And so they will be presenting each a talk. That's going to be the meat, I guess, of the technical program today. And then we're going to go through the part that everyone is here for, the reports from all the working groups. The most exciting part of the day. So let me ask you, this time we have the meeting towards the end of the week. I think it works better for us towards the end of the week than towards the beginning of the week. Do you guys agree? Can I get a hum on yes? Hum. Okay, who likes the meeting at the beginning of the week? Perfect. Great. So we have to hum because I have some newcomers that have never heard humming, so there's no option of no meeting. We could also do it, Friday afternoon in the last session, if that's what you mean. Friday afternoon, last session, hums? Oh, okay, so Chris says, no, we can't because ISS has that cornered, so we'll have to do that. So for some reason, yeah, that's what I'm doing. So I'll show the NoteWell and all the stuff when we get to the when we get everything up here so that you can actually read it. In the meantime, some of the administrative that we want to talk about is, of course, any changes in the working groups or in the area itself. Nothing has changed. We didn't open any new working groups. We didn't close any new working groups. We didn't change any chairs over the last period since the last IETF. We did recharter one working group, the role working group. So the chairs are back there. They can stand up and people can see them at work. Okay. Just try to burn the time over here. Make sure, one of the things we also want to mention is that we're always open to get your feedback. Not only on what needs to be done in the area, what kind of work we need to do, but on how we as ADs may be doing well or not, what areas we need to improve. There's going to be some time at the end today, I hope, that we can, if you want to give us feedback, that's fine. If you want to find us in the hall, that's fine as well. We always have a slide in the deck, but we always put it last, so we always never get to it. But since we have a little bit of time right now, while we play with the computers, I just want to mention that so that you are aware. One of the other things we're going to project is, besides the NoteWell, there's a slide that we always show about document reviews, about reminding you that this is a community effort, that we need to please review documents in your working groups, review documents in other working groups so that we can make together better documents and the IETF can produce more quality work. Many of you do that, many of you don't. So please volunteer to review documents. We did have a couple of other topics that I want to mention from up here. One of them is IPv6 only networks. We had talked last time about a couple of stages that the IAB had put out and the work that's going in Sunset 4. What we want to encourage you is to think about whether we're ready in the area for IPv6 only networks. In your respective working groups, are there gaps? Maybe your protocols are ready, that's fine. Are there gaps? How do we address them? What about not just gaps, but how do we do transition from IPv4 to V6 or from even dual stack to V6 only networks? So think about that. There may be some pushing or hurting that you might have to do in your working groups. The important thing is that is where we're going, and we obviously don't want to wait till the last minute to figure those things out. This is not just about enabling IPv6 only support, but it is about making sure that we can transition there. Yes? Applause from anyone? No?
V6 is out there. There's
Okay.
huge amounts of growth stats. We need to make sure the protocols work.
Yes.
One second, I'll make your slides keep talking. So ask for feedback.
And the other thing we want to mention is, of course, okay, so here's the node well. You all see it. You all should not only have it memorized, but more important, understand what it actually says. It would not be a bad idea if you actually went and read some of those RFCs that are linked there, at least once, just so you understand what it entails. It talks in there about an IETF activity, so that you understand what an IETF activity is versus other activities that could happen during the week. We did talk, okay, there's other links in there about other things, the wiki and other information in there.
So wasn't there an attempt to have the note well be shrunk down to almost readable size? Did we give up on that?
No, we did that, but no one's using it.
Actually, I think I used it once, but so I wondered if it reverted. But no, it's okay to keep using the short one? Okay.
We just have old copies of presentations.
Yeah, and I want to again make the point that I made before. Yes, the important thing is not the size, is that we actually read it and understand it. Making it smaller obviously makes people want to read it more than a lot more words in the page there. So yeah, that's a good point. We talked a little bit about document reviews. Please try and review documents in your working groups. You should all be reviewing documents anyways, as we make adoption and working group last calls. And hopefully many of you actually make comments, not just +1 remarks on the mailing list.
Yeah, your reviews are an indication of interest. They're an indication that having the documents go forwards makes sense. They stop the ADs from being grumpy when we have to read and fix documents that have not been read by anybody but the author, and they might have only read diffs for the last 10 versions. This happens. They're also a way that you can show your understanding to your colleagues in the working group, so they'll be more interested in reading your documents. This works by us all working together to review documents to get the entire output of working groups going forward, not just your own work. Really, please review documents. We do an awful lot of it.
So in case it wasn't clear, please review documents. You want to say please?
I will say please also because the other ADs are looking at the mailing lists actually for the discussion to see the interest in the document, and we've been criticized a couple of times that they see no discussion on a mailing list on documents that we're pushing through. So it helps and encourages that, there is interest in this work being published.
Okay, well, let's go to another point. Already said this, again, any feedback to us is welcome, not only on how the area is operating or whether one working group needs to do more or not, but also on how we are doing. What can we make better? How can we help? That's what we're here for. This is the agenda. As I mentioned, we have Josie and Alistair who are going to present their ANRP winning papers. And then after that, we're going to go through the working group and BOF reports, even though we didn't have a BOF this time. John is going to talk about the routing directorate and give a report there. And we should have enough time at the end to have open discussion or any other thing that you guys want to do. Yes. So I'll let you try it.
So while we're juggling presentations, sorry about that, this would be a really good time for any feedback on the area. There's a number of different pieces. We have some of the working groups which are starting to finish up. There's some talk on various topics that touch on working groups that we already have going. There are probably other conversations that would be useful to have. And, you know, this is a time, and are there things that you see that we should be paying attention, that the routing area should be paying attention to? Are there things happening in industry that we're being oblivious to, or that we would do better for tie-ins? This is a fun time to talk about any of that while we're juggling presentations. So we'd really appreciate some feedback. All right, if you guys don't give us feedback, I'm going to have to resort to bad jokes. Or, all right, no, sorry. I will do, instead of resorting to bad jokes, I will do a brief segue into something else, which is part of why Laura and I were a little late. It's just talking about, sorry, Laura was, of course, perfectly on time, as always. There's a number of different experiments that are going on in the IETF on how we can run better and what types of things we can do better. One of the things we've been doing for this IETF and the previous IETF in NVO3 is getting away from presentation styles meetings, because they're not nearly as useful for FaceTime as actually talking to people. It turns out that talking to people is really useful. And so in NVO3, we've been having small group discussions, breaking apart into 3 or 4 different groups, and then coming back together to talk about it. And that's something that I think, you know, please talk to Matthew Bocci, who's one of the NVO co-chairs who's here, or Ignis, who's the secretary. I wrote up a little bit of a wiki page for the ISG about it, see what works. You can also come to the next NVO3 meeting and hear the report outs from the roundtable and get a sense of how, even though we break apart into different groups, we still end up in good shape because the different perspectives are shown. One of the other experiments that's been going on is what we're calling IETF hubs, whether those are for awareness and outreach that I've been doing, remote participation, or community hubs. We've been doing community hubs in the Boston area and in Bangalore. And if you have interest in getting together with other IETFers and pulling other folks in to try to do something locally, come talk to me, because I'm extremely enthusiastic about it. And with that, I think we've got the presentations ready to go.
You want to try and plug this in there? Josie. Okay, so we're going to start with the presentations, and we're going to have Josie Gilad come and talk about jumpstarting BGP security with path end validation.
Okay, so thanks for inviting me. I'll present Jumpstarting BGP Security, joint work with Amir Hertzberg, Avichai Cohen, and Michael Shapira. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this talk is all about inter-domain routing security, and let me just briefly remind some of the problems in today's de facto protocol, which is BGP. So BGP doesn't have any authentication on it, and so it's vulnerable to hijacks. So consider what would happen if Boston University at AS111 would announce its prefix. So it would send a BGP announcement to its neighbor, ASX, and now ASX learns the route to reach BU. Can you go to the next slide?
Oh, you're the actual point when you push.
And so now ASX would relay that announcement to its own neighbors, of course, adding its own identifier to the route. So now, in this case, the victim AS receives a path for BU's IP prefix with the path X and then 111. But what would happen if the attacker at 666 would announce the same IP prefix? Well, now the victim has two routes to reach the same IP prefix, and which way it would choose? Well, in this case, it would choose to go with the shorter route. So it would send its traffic down the attacker's path. So to mitigate such attacks, there's a new mechanism that's being rolled out now called the Resource Public Key Infrastructure, or the RPKI. Some of you may be familiar with it. So the RPKI really maps IP prefixes to the organizations that own them, and it allows us to do two things, or it's meant to do two things. So the first one is to provide origin authentication, which allows to prevent hijacks, and I'm going to show that. And the second one is to sort of lay the cryptographic foundation for protection against more sophisticated path manipulation attacks. And in particular, RPKI is the basis for BGP-SEC. Next slide. Okay, so how would one deploy origin authentication? How would one use the origin authentication with the RPKI? Well, so in the RPKI, there are these globally available repositories, and the repositories store route origin authorization records, or ROAs, and each ROA specifies an AS number and then a list of prefixes that are allowed to be announced from that AS number. And so, so the way this would usually be deployed is that the operator would deploy a local cache machine, which is just a general purpose machine, in the autonomous system, and that local cache would then sync with the databases. Next slide. It would check the signatures, so it would do all the cryptographic operations, and then if the signatures are valid, it would configure the routers with whitelist rules. Next slide. Which in this case mean that the IP prefix 168.122 can only be announced from AS111. Next slide. So how would that prevent a prefix hijack? Well, consider the scenario we had earlier. Now the victim receives these two advertisements, but really the advertisement from 666 is from an unauthorized origin, as appeared to be by the ROAs. And so now if the victim is using the RPKI filtering, he can discard that advertisement and send its traffic down the correct path. Next slide. But the attacker can also do more sophisticated attacks. And in particular, it could announce that it could make its announcement as if it would originate from the legitimate AS111, and only relayed by the attacker at 666. So now the victim receives this advertisement, and still in this case, the attacker's route is shorter, so it would take the attacker's route and send its traffic in the wrong direction. Next slide. So the current paradigm to secure inter-domain routing really has two steps, and the first one is to deploy RPKI, provide origin authentication, and prevent hijacking. And then the second one is to deploy BGP-SEC. which protects against these sort of false links that are being announced, that might be announced. So the way that BGPsec work, well, the origin would, so BGPsec adds this notion of secure paths, and in this case, the origin would announce the route to its IP prefix. It would also sign the announcement being sent to ASX. So essentially, it would sort of authenticate that the link between 111 and X does exist. And when ASX receives this announcement, it would do two things. So it would check that it matches the RPKI policy and that indeed 111 is a valid source for this announcement. And then it would also check the signature to make sure that 111 really did approve the link with ASX. Next slide. And so if everything is valid now, ASX would relay that announcement, add the next hop identifier, and then sign. So now there are two signatures. Next slide. And the last router would need to verify both of them and check with the RPKI policy. Now, what are the challenges with BGPsec? So there's really a deployment challenge here because it requires to do real-time signature validation. So we might need to upgrade routers, and that might mean that we're going to have a long interim where we'll have both BGP and BGPsec deployed, and while BGPsec is being rolled out. And the second thing is that it changes the message format. And that means that that might suggest that there will be some compatibility issues. Next slide. So how good is BGPsec under parser adoption given this changing format? If you consider the following topology, here the blue ASs all deploy BGPsec. And almost everyone who's good deploys BGPsec except for one, that is ASX. And that means that if AS111 tries to announce its IP prefix in BGPsec, next slide. Well, ASX really doesn't speak BGPsec, and so this cannot be done. Essentially, ASX breaks the BGPsec path. Next slide. So what would happen is that AS111 would need to announce its IP prefix in BGP, and that means that we are going back exactly to the same spoofed origin attack, and now the victim receives these two announcements all in BGP. The attacker also advertises himself in BGP, and so it would choose to go to send its traffic in the wrong path. Next slide. So our goals here in this talk is really to sort of design a mechanism that would provide security against these forged origin attacks and provide significant benefits in partial deployment. That is especially the part that we're interested in. And the second one is on the deployment side, we'd want to have something that has a minimal overhead, and in particular does all the cryptographic operation offline and off the router, and does not change the BGP message format. So we won't have these compatibility issues. And in some sense, this is similar to the way RPKI is being deployed today. Next slide. So I'll present pattern validation. And what pattern validation really does is it extends the RPKI to sort of authenticate the last hop on the route. So, so the way this would be deployed is, well, you would have a similar database which would have these edge authenticators, a new or another type of record that would allow ASs to say who their neighbors are. So in that case, AS111 would say that it's connected to ASX, and that would stop the forged origin attack in this case, because, well, now the victim would see that the attacker's announcement really has a link, really says that it's connected to 111, which is not valid according to the database. Next slide. So the victim would send its traffic down the correct path. Next slide. And so how much security would that sort of tiny extension buy us? Well, so in this bar chart, we compare 4 protocols. The y-axis says the attacker's average success rate. So how many AESs on average will an attacker be able to attack? The blue bar shows what happens with BGP, vanilla BGP with no authentication when the attacker does prefix hijack. But in that case, the attacker success rate is 50%. If you add RPKI and perform origin authentication on top of that, you get something that's just a bit shy of 30%. If you do the RPKI and the path-end validation, you go down to about 14%. And what's the best that you could hope for under partial adoption? Well, that would be what would happen if BGPsec is actually adopted by everyone, but still BGP is not deprecated, so the attacker is still able to advertise himself in BGP. In that case, you would get something that's very close to 10% success rate for the attacker. So you can see, next slide, that the difference between path-end validation and BGPsec is really, under partial deployment, is really not that large. Next slide. So some intuition as to why this would buy us some significant benefits. Well, the main intuition is that the average AS path length on the internet is actually quite short. And so if we make the attacker, so the attacker could circumvent this path-end validation by using a longer route. But using longer routes also mean that the attacker's route is less attractive. And so so considering the quite short AS path length on the internet, this would actually be a significant handicap for the attacker. Next slide. How would path-end validation be deployed? Well, so very similar to the way RVKI is deployed, we have another database. We have the local cache. The local cache obtains both types of records. It verifies the signatures. Next slide. And then it deploys whitelist rules. So in addition to the origin authentication rule from the RPKI, it would also add another rule, which is that AS111 can only be followed by ASX in this case. Next slide. And this can actually be materialized with today's routers, and in particular today's access list interface. So, so you could configure this sort of regular expression filtering rule. And the nice thing about that is that it would sort of expand to more than the last hop, the more ASs adopt. So if ASX also adopts and also registers its neighbors, well, now you actually authenticate 2 hops, and you need to have 2 rules to do that, one for 111 and one for X. But you can extend, but the routes, the authentication of the route extends. Next slide. So we evaluated this mechanism under partial adoption using simulations. The way we simulated is every time we used the KAIDA AS level network graph, and in each iteration of the simulation we picked 2 ASs, so one victim and one attacker at random. Next slide. And then we pick a set of ASs who are performing the filtering. Next slide. And then we measured, given this deployment, which ASs would route their traffic to the victim and which to the attacker. So that would give us the attacker success rate, which is the metric that we're using. Next slide. So let me give you some of our results. So in this graph, we compare between two types of attacks. So one is the next AS attack, where the attacker announces that it is the next hop for the legitimate origin. This is precisely the attack that path-end validation is meant to mitigate. So you can see that the attacker success rate in the blue line continuously decreases as more ASs perform filtering on the x-axis. In this case, the adopters are the top ISPs. So the ISP is really the core of the internet. You can see that with about 20 of them would adopt, that would already mean that the attacker should actually switch and perform this two-hop attack, where it's announcing that it's a neighbor of a neighbor. Next slide. So to put this into context, here are two reference lines. So the red line shows what you would get with origin authentication with the RPKI, and the green line says what would you get if BGPsec would be in the best possible partial deployment scenario for BGPsec. So when everyone have BGPsec deployed, but BGP is still allowed. Next slide. And here's a final reference line, which is what would happen with BGPsec under the same partial adoption scenario. So you can see that it would almost have no effect over vanilla RPKI. Next slide. We've also checked other scenarios. So in particular, what would happen for local deployment. And in this case, this graph shows what happens when there's a local deployment in North America. So only the top ISPs in North America deployed. And we check what would happen if an attacker in North America, how much traffic would it be able to capture from North American ASs. And you can see a similar trend. So already with the 10 top ISPs, you actually get pretty good protection. And the attacker should switch to the two-hop attack, which is very close to what you would get with BGPsec being fully deployed, but BGP is still allowed. We also see the same trends in Europe. So that might suggest a nice deployment strategy. Next slide. Finally, you might ask, well, why not go farther? Why not authenticate the last two hops and not just the last hop? Well, there are two reasons. So for an operator, it's very hard to tell. Well, while the operator knows who are they linking to, they don't necessarily know the next hop neighbor. So that might be hard to configure. And in addition, what this graph compares is the attacker success rate with the number of hops that the adversary is forced to announce. So if there is no authentication, the attacker can announce that it is the origin, so essentially 0 hops, and get about 50% success rate. If with RPKI the attacker is forced to add one more hop, with pattern validation 2 more, and you can see what happens with the 2-hop validation. The attacker would be forced to add another hop that gives almost no additional benefit. Next slide. Some more results we have in the paper, where large content providers are better protected. We also found that pattern validation could mitigate high-profile incidents that we've seen in the past. And finally, that pattern validation is security monotone, which means that the more ASs, when an AS adopts, necessarily the global internet security doesn't worsen. Next slide. So just to conclude my talk, I presented pattern validation, which can significantly improve inter-domain routing security while sort of circumventing the deployment hurdles of BGPsec. We advocate extending the RPKI to support pattern validation, and once this is done, some regulatory and financial efforts might provide the tenable security benefits. Next slide. So with that, I'd like to thank you.
Hi, my name is Uma Chundari, Huawei. So are you extending any BGPsec protocol messages for this, or just putting the cache, updating the cache with the path and AS?
So again, what
Are you updating the BGPsec protocol for this?
Oh, no. So this is actually, so all the messages are still BGP in that.
So how do you get the path and information to all the routers in the?
Oh, I see. So the deployment is very similar to the way you would do origin authentication with the RPKI. So you would deploy a machine, just a local, a typical host machine, and it would sync with our repositories. So it would download everything and then configure the routers, basically using the existing interfaces.
Okay. So, but instead of that, you can actually sign the next hop too, right?
So yeah, you would sign it in the repository. So that would mean that you wouldn't change the actual messages.
But the advantage is it's inline. Actually, when you send the update messages, it's in the cache need not be synced to all the places. If you sign it inline, so all the routers will get the messages. Like, when the update message is received, it's already there. What the origin wants to do. When
Yeah. So this entire mechanism sort of works off the critical path. So you would need to sync ahead of time, essentially configure your router so that they would know to discard invalid announcements.
So
At the
what I'm
time
saying
they
is
receive
there is
them.
an advantage if you change the BGP-SEC protocol to sign the first hop router. So it will be inline actually when the update messages goes all the way.
So I think, yeah.
It's only authenticates the origin, right? So then what I'm thinking is
So-
like the next hop to
Mhm. Yeah, so in BGP-SEC you would sign the announcement.
I know, BGP-SEC does everything, just origin authentication, only RTK, origin authentication. When you sign the origin authentication, you just also sign the origin.
Yeah.
Jeff, so the idea of actually using the AS graph, for this type of authentication has been around for at least 20 years. RPSL, as a database, has this information, and as Rtgarea is making up funny noises, the database is currently full of crap. So that's one of the reasons why it has not been used. But in terms of a place that such things could be put, the idea has been there for a while. It's just a matter of a clean source of data and having it signed. The RPSL signing extensions were never implemented by anybody as far as I'm aware of. This sort of came up again. I think Russ White was the first one that actually popped this up in terms of distributing the graph information, the protocol SOBGP. So the idea of actually using graph information to try to limit the attack space has been proposed before. It's not a bad idea as this actually helps in cases where you're not lying, where BGP-SEC actually keeps you from lying. I'm a little skeptical at some of the results you have in your graph based on those prior talks. So I'll spend some time looking at your presentation and trying to find the old talks against it. But this is something for you to take a look at in terms of where it's at. One thing that is inside of your graphs that particularly confuses me is it looks like you're saying that this mechanism is better than BGP-SEC because you're showing BGP-SEC as being actually worse on your graphs than this partial.
So for that point, it's the same partial adoption. So you are considering what would happen if the top 100 ISPs on the internet would adopt, right? So consider what would happen if they would do BGP-SEC instead. So in that case, most paths on the internet would actually be very, there would be almost no one who would do BGP-SEC. The chance of you to get a full path, which is fully BGP-SEC, is actually quite low, which is why you would get.
That is absolutely expected. The rollout for BGP-SEC is expected to be done in islands of adjacent ASs that actually care about such things rather than several disconnected parties. So the validation is typically going to be the first couple of hops if it's going to happen at all.
Okay.
Sandy Murphy Parsons. My first comment has nothing to do with the point of your talk, but it's a point of terminology that I think would be troubling. The very first slide, one of the first slides, you said RPKI maps an IP prefix to the organization that owns it. And I said, oh my Lord, how did we let that one go by? And I went and checked 6480, and it doesn't use the word owns, and it doesn't use the word maps, and it doesn't use the word organization in that way.
That's true. I simplified for the presentation.
The information of what mapping a prefix to the organization that owns it is available in the RIR member databases. You don't need the RPKI. And if you may be presenting this talk to people who don't understand registries and prefix allocation system, all that kind of stuff, please don't use exactly those words because people are going to dismiss RPKI. It's not the right thing. And it's not mapping a prefix to the organization that owns the AS that's announcing it either. That also has been proposed, but there are endless opportunities to have somebody else announce your prefix for you. It maps a prefix to the AS that's authorized to announce it.
Yep.
And yeah, okay. Secondly, in the BGPsec slide, you said it's a change in the message format. It provides a new optional transitive attribute. I don't think anybody thinks of that as a change in the message format. There is the AS path is encapsulated in the BGPsec attribute. You may regard that as the change in the message format, but you said it'd be interoperability problems, and BGPsec attributes aren't passed to a non-BGPsec speaker. And the AS path is extracted from the attribute and put in the update, so there's not an interoperability there. I am curious what you meant about your graphs that had BGPsec full deployment legacy allowed. What does that mean?
So that would mean that BGP messages are still allowed. Basically, you're still allowed to advertise in BGP.
Okay, so it's not full deployment.
Well, it is fully deployed in this. Well, it's the best parser adoption scenario you could hope for, right? Everyone adopts BGPsec, but you're still allowed to advertise in BGP. So essentially the protocol was not deprecated yet. You could treat that as our way of bounding the effects in parser adoption.
Yeah. So how do you represent if everybody's doing BGPsec, how do you represent the legacy BGP speakers in your simulation if everybody's doing BGPsec?
Right. So essentially that would mean that if you've received the message from your customer, so if your local prefs would prefer the message, you would take it even though it was BGP. Otherwise, you would prefer the secure path.
But if everybody's a BGPsec speaker, you shouldn't be seeing any BGP.
Well, right, but the protocol was not deprecated, so it's not official that, right? Well, you are still allowed to advertise in BGP, basically.
If
You are allowed not to accept those the unsecure announcements with priority.
Right. So in our simulation, the priority would be after your local prefs. Basically, if you would receive a message with BGP, a BGP message from your customer, you would take it.
but everybody speaks BGPsec, so why would you be receiving a BGP message?
Well, because the attacker advertises in BGP, basically. So everyone speaks BGPsec, but it's not known, right? So for our simulation, that's a way to bound the parser adoption scenario, basically.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
You can think of it as everyone, but except for one guy, right? So in that case, you're still expected to see some BGP messages.
I'll have to check the protocol as to if you.
Yeah, we can chat about that online, and the paper actually has a lot of details as to
Yeah.
how we bound
So,
it.
well, I mean, so you're doing your simulation, you're sprinkling these BGP in this field that is supposed to be all BGPsec. You're going to get different results if there's one person out of 60,000 ASs that's speaking BGP and one that.
All right, so yeah, that's exactly why we repeated that.
Yeah, I think you could mold the results of your simulation by what parameters you set for the full deployment, but not full deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, okay, I better let somebody.
Hi, Carlos from LACNIC.
Hi.
I had 2 points. First point was the same as Sandy. I understand where you come from when you say what you said in the first slide, but it's a very dangerous simplification. Very dangerous, especially when we, as CA operators, we go preach this to different organizations, in some cases government related, and please. Okay. Second point is, I'm as a CA operator, what would be the changes that I need to introduce in my provisioning system, and what are the changes that you mentioned are needed in the Rtgarea? I imagine at least some new object or a different ROA profile, or some changes to the RTR protocol, at least.
Yeah.
I'm missing something else.
No, I think there's nothing else. So basically, you would need a way to introduce that into the database and a way to configure the routers. You could sort of, the change to the RTR protocol would be the best way probably to make that configuration. You could also use the existing interfaces, which is sort of the way we've prototyped with it. But the change for the RTR is a better way to go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. Just one sentence, all the comments on using please precise language, in particular if you're coming from the academic area. I would like to just repeat. For your statistics and some comments I already injected, my question would be, well, okay, in your models, what policies did you actually assume that the participants would be using?
So we assumed, we assumed that they would prefer routes from the customers over routes from the peers.
Oh,
and from the
and you assume you allow customers, though BGP-SEC is fully available, to insert bad, unsecure announcements, and you still say, well, okay, if my customer pays me, I'm going to support the fake announcement.
Well, yeah, think of it as our way to bound the security under partial adoption. So if you're in the partial adoption scenario, right, what is the absolute best you could hope for? Well, that is the absolute best, right? You would hope for everyone to adopt, right? Because we're still, if everyone adopts, right, and BGP is completely unavailable, that is not a partial adoption scenario. In that case, yeah, BGP-SEC would do better, right? But we wanted to bound what you would get under partial adoption, basically.
I think the policies that are actually used will be different. I can assure you that at least a few operators will do different.
Right. So yeah, I assume that the graph has some things that are misrepresented in our simulation. That's basically the best way we know of to do that. Yeah.
Sandy Murphy Parsons, I'm not sure that I heard you when you were listing what would need to be done to put this into operation. The fact that you would need to have the router vendors change the way that they evaluate updates, right?
No, so they wouldn't need to change the way they evaluate updates. So the way we see that, so again, you would configure this sort of filtering rules. In the way we sort of did that in our implementation is to use the existing ACL interfaces and configure the filtering rules with the existing interface.
So you use the an AS path in the filtering? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I thought I'd say a word about this deployment model for BGP-SEC. And we had many arguments about whether you should do partial path signing. That was the acronym for it, or the term, of you've gotten a bunch of unsigned paths and an update which has an unsigned path in it, and for some reason you trust it and you're willing to sign it. Why is that a bad thing? And the bad thing is it allows attackers to then construct any old path that they want and say, I got it unsigned and now I'm adding the signatures. And if you presume that the signatures are of get things considered as a better path, then that opens an attack path that we deliberately went to this mechanism to eliminate.
Right, that's not the case here.
I know. I'm just for the people who are listening, why on earth? Yeah, that's why. It would open an attack path.
I'm just going to say, I'm going to cut the line right after you.
AC Lyndon, I can see how it would be tenable to do the last hop, but when you do 2 hop, and it seems like you'd get more and more permutations that you'd individually sign, and if you did 3 hop, there'd be more and more. You know, it's kind of like, you know, BGP sec is a generalized solution where, you know, there's individual signing for everybody in the path, whereas with this you have you do all the permutations, and it seems like, so well last hop is tenable. If you did 2, you'd get a lot. How many permutations did you see in your?
No, we only did the last hop.
Oh, you only did last hop.
Yeah,
oh,
we only did the last hop.
I saw you had 2 hop on the.
Oh, no. So what I was saying is that if you would continue to do the 2 hop, not only it would be hard because of what you've just said.
I didn't read the paper. I just downloaded
Okay.
it. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Matthias Welisch. Brief question. Who's allowed to create these new RPKI objects? Is it only the prefix owner? I mean,
yeah. So essentially, if you have the RPKI certificate, that should allow you to create this new.
Okay, so that means it's more or less a prefix owner, and but this also means that in case that NNS that I do not own but authorized to announce my prefix, cannot establish new peering sessions only when I updated these objects, right?
Yeah, so you would need to
as a positive attestation model. So,
well, not necessarily, right? So you would have a certificate for that AS number, which means that you would be able to register.
Then it's not the prefix owner, then it's something different.
Yeah. But you would need, so the guy with the certificate for the AS number.
Okay, but this changed something completely to what we have today, right? I mean, if I create a ROA, I'm the prefix owner, I authorize an AS, that's it, the origin AS. And in your case,
So consider how would BGPsec be deployed, right? So with BGPsec, what key would you use to sign the announcement for the next hop, right?
Yes,
so
but the problem
it's
is
the same key that you would use to sign this path and policy. Does that answer your question?
Not really. Okay,
we can
take it
check.
offline.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you everyone for participating in the discussion. This is great. I'm going to volunteer Josie to answer more questions today and tomorrow. Now we're going to have Alistair King talk about BGP Stream.
All right, good morning. So I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes bashing BGPsec and BGP. No, just kidding. I'm Alistair King. I'm from CADA, Center for Applied Internet Data Analysis at UC San Diego. And so this is some work that we presented last year at the Internet Measurement Conference. But more specifically, this is some software. Well, that was a slide describing some software that we developed over the last few years that makes it easy, simple to do potentially complex analysis of, in most cases, publicly available BGP measurement data. So we've made public, open source a set of libraries, APIs, and tools that allow you to get access to and process this BGP data. And we have tried, and a part of what I'm here for this morning is we've tried to make this software useful for both researchers and operators. So I'm coming from the researcher community where we've used this in several projects. So I'm sort of soliciting feedback from the real world people to get input into how we can make this more useful for people. And so as I've mentioned, in addition to doing this historical analysis of BGP data, we've sort of made it so that you can kind of toggle a switch and then go into this kind of real-time continuous monitoring mode or near real-time analysis of this public data. And then, as I've said, so this is already open source. It's been available for about a year and a half now. And we've had quite a few researchers already using it. We've had some people publishing papers that have used this framework in order to do their analysis. So you might wonder, why develop this software? As researchers, we make use of really tons of existing and ongoing BGP measurement data. So there's these two major collection efforts in this space. There's route views and RIPE-RIS. How many of you have heard of route views and or RIPE-RIS? Okay, good. And so these two projects each have been collecting data for more than 15 years now. But as much as we make use of this data for research, and as much data as there is available, when we came to this a couple of years ago to develop these projects that we're trying to do continuous near real-time monitoring of BGP, we really found that there was sort of this real lack of good tooling in this space. And in our experience, at least, the state of the art here is go to route views, browse around the website, download the file that I'm interested in, run BGP dump, convert that MRT data to ASCII, and then pipe that through some parsing script that I hacked together for my specific purpose. And then, of course, rinse and repeat for all of the hundreds of files that I'm interested in. And so as you can imagine, not only is this tedious and sort of the one-off ad hoc research case, but this becomes impossible in the case where I'm wanting to do continuous monitoring of this BGP measurement data. And so in order to solve this problem, especially for this continuous monitoring and this complex analysis, this is where we've developed BGP Stream. So BGP Stream is this distributed framework. It's comprised of sort of these two high-level components. We have a metadata broker. So this is a web service that we run currently an instance of at CADA. And then we have a set of libraries that are run by users on their machines. And so basically what happens is the metadata broker has this sort of continuous background process that is going out and crawling and indexing the data that's been made publicly available on these data archives. So right now, our implementation is crawling and indexing the route views and RIPE-RIS data. And then the user libraries, so as I say, these are running on users' machines. You can run this on your laptop, on some server, whatever. They will make queries to the metadata broker based on the user's needs, the data the user needs. And then the metadata broker will respond with telling the user where to go to find the files they're interested in. So what I hope is clear here is that the metadata broker, the BGP Stream service itself, is not dealing in BGP data. It's not serving you BGP data. It's just telling these libraries where to go to find it. So then, as the user's library is going out, retrieving the data from these public archives, as the data is being pulled back, there's a stack of components, running on your machine that's deserializing, analyzing the data, and doing your analysis with it. So another sort of maybe more rigorous way of looking at this is in this sort of stacked view here, where on the bottom we have the data providers I was talking about, so route views, RIPE-RIS. We also support if you have sort of private, locally available measurement data, you can use that. And then have the metadata providers, of which that metadata broker web service is one example of those type of providers. And the second layer, we have the libbgp stream library. So this is the C library that's the core of the BGP Stream framework. And it's responsible for retrieving data from these distributed data sources and then sort of demultiplexing that into a single stream for the user to process and analyze, which is this top layer here. So these are applications written by users. We have C API, Python API, and then we have a couple of command line tools. And I'll kind of walk through each of these over the course of the presentation. So I should point out here that blue boxes are things that we have developed as part of this framework. And then there's a star on the blue boxes that denotes pieces that have already been released publicly as open source. So libbgp stream, this is the core part of the library. Before I talk about this, I just want to mention, currently we are supporting only the MRT data format inside of BGP Stream. We are well aware that there are other efforts to sort of modernize the way BGP data is collected, so that we know for sure there's the BMP standard, as well as RIS is working on another format for collecting and streaming live BGP measurement data. We are currently working actively with Cisco and the OpenBMP people to add native BMP and OpenBMP support to BGP Stream. But for the moment, there is this wealth of MRT data that's available, and it's continuing to be collected. And in our experience, it's actually pretty useful, even in this sort of near real-time, pseudo-real-time type of analysis. So, libbgp Stream, it's, as I said, it will make a query to that metadata broker service, go out and then retrieve the data from potentially many data sources, demultiplex that into a single stream, where that single stream, it's doing some effort to do some sort of time ordering on that, so that as a user's application can process that data in this sort of time ordered fashion. So the BGP Stream has the C API. We've made some effort here to try and make this API as simple as it can be, at least for C API. We are exposing these two data structures. The first is what we're calling a record, and really that is just a wrapper around the raw MRT record. And the reason we're applying this wrapper is we have some metadata available in BGP Stream that's not available in the MRT record. So for example, the name of the collector that collected the data is added as an annotation inside of this record. And then because these MRT records can contain information for multiple peers, multiple prefixes, so for the example, in the case of a rib dump inside MRT, there's some compression that happens that means that the routes for multiple peers to a single prefix are encoded inside of a single message, inside of a single MRT record. And so what we do is we decompose this information into multiple alums, where just to simplify processing, so each alum contains information for a single prefix as seen by a single peer. So this is a real example of using the C API. This will create and then configure an instance of BGP Stream. So the part that I've highlighted here, this is what I think is the more interesting part of this process here. We're applying these filters. So in this first case, we're saying, please only give me data from the RRC06 write risk collector, as well as the route use jinx collector. And so in this string, you'll get data interleaved from both of these collectors. And then we say only give us the updates data. So don't, implicitly it's saying don't give me the rib dump information from these collectors. And then of course specify a time range of data that we're interested in processing. And then once you've configured it, there's this sort of nested while loop where first you iterate over the records that are in the stream. And then for each record, iterate over the alums. So this atomic prefix peer combination here. And so this sort of style, if you've ever used something like libpcap or libtrace for doing passive traffic analysis, this is going to be very familiar. Indeed, we've modeled it on that type of API. So, in addition to the C library, we have these Python bindings. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but sort of the point is as a case study, we took some research that's been done in sort of the BGP space, looking at AS path inflation. And we said, hey, we can probably do this with BGP Stream, we can do this with the Python API. And so we found that this work that previously would have been really onerous and really quite time consuming and potentially very manual, we're able to do in this sort of 30 lines of Python code. And then in addition to this, the script now has indeed the analysis logic, but the other cool thing that we get here is because of how we're configuring the stream, the script also includes the data specification. So now I can hand this script to somebody else and they can reproduce my experiment without needing to know well, it's implicit here inside of the script what the data was that I processed. And so as a researcher, I go back a year later and I don't have to remember what it was that I processed. It's written right here. And so this is really enhancing the reproducibility and repeatability in these cases. And so then another case study we did, we were using the Python bindings here, but really the point of this was to look at the near real-time capabilities of BGP Stream. And so what we did is we looked at community-based blackholing. So this is where the victim of a denial of service attack announces some prefix with a special community attribute set requesting that their neighbor drop traffic toward that prefix. And so we use the PyBGP Stream Python bindings to monitor for announcements with these community attributes set. And then when we see these announcements, we trigger trace routes using RIPE Atlas. And then similarly, when we see the withdrawal, we trigger additional trace routes. And now we have these two data sets, one during the black holing event, one after it's supposedly finished. And so there's some interesting results about this measurement in the paper. But sort of the point that I wanted to make here is not so much about the results, but with using these Python bindings and this near real-time capability, we made it easy, and it was indeed easy for us to do this sort of combined passive control plane and reactive data plane measurements that we're able to look at these transient routing policies. And so then, as I mentioned, we have a couple of command line tools. One of them is sort of similar to the BGP dump tool, where you can kind of just give it some parameters and it'll give you ASCII output, for those of you who like that kind of thing. We have this other tool, BGP Corsaro, which really is designed for use in this sort of continuous, more sort of operational monitoring context. It's plugin based, so you can create a plugin that will be passed all of the BGP data, and then periodically it'll be told to output some kind of aggregate statistics. And so there's sort of a case study using this in the paper. I don't have time to go into it now, but basically we used a plugin that we created for this and investigated a hijacking of the GAR research network. And the graph here actually shows just exactly the output that we're getting from this plugin, where you can see sort of on the, what is that, the second y-axis, the number of origin ASs. So there's these 4 spikes there where we see that there was another AS announcing address space of GAR. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we have a lot of historical BGP measurement data from RouteViews and RIPERIS. And so we said, if you kind of tilt your head a little bit and close one eye, you can kind of think of this as big data. And hey, there are ways to deal with big data. So we took the BGP stream bindings and the Apache Spark big data framework, put them together, and it turns out they work quite well together. And we were able to analyze 15 years of BGP data pretty easily and pretty quickly. And so there are sort of some sample results from this analysis in the paper, but again, my point here is this BGP stream makes this type of analysis easier. And indeed, we've released some of the template scripts that we used on the BGP stream GitHub page. So in the next couple of slides, I'm just going to sort of jump through a couple of examples. But again, here, the point's not so much the results, but how we got the results. So, size the routing table over time, of course. And then we looked at the prevalence of transit ASs in V4 and V6 over time. And so, if you're interested in the results, I'd encourage you to check the paper. If you're interested in using BGP Stream in this sort of historical longitudinal analysis, I'd be happy to talk more about that as well. So then the final use case that we have here is using BGP Stream to do continuous real-time global monitoring of BGP. And so we did this at CADA in the context of these 2 projects that we've had over the last few years. The first, we used BGP as one of its data sources, and this was looking for large-scale internet outages or connectivity disruptions caused by things like censorship, weather anomalies, that kind of thing. And then the other was another project that is looking at detecting BGP hijacking attacks. And so in this case, I've highlighted on the top right of that diagram the components that we built on top of the BGP Corsaro tool to do this continuous monitoring of BGP. And I'm going to quickly sort of skip through a couple of the challenges that we encountered in this space. And really the point here with highlighting these challenges is there's sort of some there are some things that we have deliberately chosen not to solve in the core BGP Stream library because we've decided that different applications have different requirements in the space. And so we've sort of deferred that to the user to figure out how to do that. So the first one here, in both of these projects, we needed to have this fine-grained visibility into, let's say, a global view of BGP. We wanted this at this 1-minute granularity. So to put a fine point on that, we wanted to, for every peer of the route views and write first collectors, infer the routing table, let's say, of that peer at a 1 minute granularity. And so to do that, we took the BGP Corsaro tool, created a plugin for it that uses, finite state machine, and then basically uses a rib dump as a sync frame and is applying the updates that as sort of incremental diffs, incremental patches. And then every minute it publishes that inferred routing table snapshot. Then, sort of next challenge here, the scale of data that we're processing is significant. Over these two collection projects, there's something like 30 something collectors, maybe 400 or so peers. And so there's sort of this intuition here that there's quite a bit of redundancy in the BGP data. So we take that output, that per minute inferred routing table data, and then just simply diff two successive snapshots. And we find that actually even at these 1 minute granularities, there's still, we still get a 3 times reduction in data volume when we compare these diffs to the raw update stream. And then finally, and I don't have time to kind of go through all of the gory details here, but if you're interested in this, I'd be happy to talk about this later. The last challenge that we have is because the data coming from these collectors are distributed, and the data that arrives with variable latency, and then of course, sometimes doesn't arrive at all. We have this sort of typical synchronization problem where we're inferring these per peer routing table at this 1 minute granularity, and in order to build this, as I say, global view, we have to buffer these tables while we're waiting for data from other collectors to arrive. So we have this sort of traditional trade-off between the amount of data we're willing to buffer, how long an application is willing to wait in order to see the data, and then how much, what library at the data that at where the route views archive keeps that data.
Right. Okay.
So in that case of the hijacking analysis, what BGP Stream was doing was it will make a query to that metadata service that will then tell them which files it should go and retrieve from these archives, and then it processes them
Right.
in order to come up with these time series that you saw.
Okay, so you have to kind of do it over and over for each analysis that you're trying to get.
I mean, over and over in terms of processing the same files, yes. If you're processing the same, time range and parameters, yes,
Right.
you would end up using the same.
Okay. I thought one of the problems in determining prefix hijacks based on previous history is anomaly detection and having false positives and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Combining it with that trace route ability to see whether the packets actually get there and what kind of hairpin turns and all the other weird stuff
Yeah.
we've seen would be really cool.
Yeah.
If I had another question, I've forgotten it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, John Christoph. I've worked with your colleague a little bit at a hackathon at Nanog with this. She introduced me to your tools.
Chiara?
So I want to, yes.
Okay.
So I just want to at least make that comment to you, and I found it very useful for
Great.
a project we were using. It's been a while since I've used it. I've been meaning to get back to it, but as I recall, one of the things that was a little bit, well, there was a couple of things that maybe just took getting some used to, but was a little tricky, was you had to, unless you wanted just a vast amount of data, which could be quite a lot to deal with, especially if you're at all resource constrained, is you had to kind of know where it is that you wanted to get it from, like RIS02 or whatever it was. If there was any way to, if it doesn't exist, if there was any way to help maybe index what we might expect to, or where we may want to go look for certain types of things, like either a route origin AS or that sort of thing, that would maybe be helpful.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. And I think I've had another conversation with somebody about that this week, so I'll look into it. Thanks.
Thank you, Alistair, so much. So now we're going to go into the lightning round and get reports. We're going to start with John's Routing Directorate report, which is in one of the slides. Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm John. So this is the Routing Directorate report. Actually, before I start this, I'm also taking the minutes of this meeting, and I just like a plea for help. If you could head over to the Etherpad, particularly if you were standing up earlier at the mic, commenting on one of those two presentations. If you could head over to the Etherpad, because you'll talk a lot faster than my two-finger typing can keep up with. Just check that I've recorded your comments correctly. That would be great. All right, so on with the report. Just a reminder.
John,
Yep.
maybe we just mention that Amy has joined, right? Just say that they know the name then.
Yeah, I was about to say that. So I'm John. My co-coordinator is Amy. Is Amy in the room?
Yeah, I don't know. Amy, are you?
Amy
great.
is over here. All right. So
Okay, hey, thank you, Amy. For taking
Amy
this on.
has stepped in and joined me as co-coordinator in the last few months, and she's doing a terrific job. So thanks, Amy. I'm sure this is working. It was off. That's it. Okay, yeah, so just a reminder quickly of the role of a routing directorate. It's a panel of routing area experts appointed by the ADs. We have about 4 to 6 current members in the directorate last time I counted, which was last night.
And they do expert reviews of all the drafts at IETF last call that the ADs want us to review. Also, occasionally we do early reviews of drafts before IETF last call if working group chairs specifically request that. Amy and myself will assign reviews that are requested out to the directorate members in sort of a round-robin algorithm most of the time. So directorate members tend to have quite a good mix of documents to review. Occasionally we'll handpick someone with specific expertise, but usually we'll just round-robin them. Now the directorate is also there to assist the area directorates to make judgment calls from time to time. You can read more about it on the wiki. A few quick statistics for the previous period from IETF 97 to 98. We had about 40 reviews come in to the directorate to do. So that's about one review per member, more or less. About half of those reviews were for IETF last call documents. About half of those reviews were early reviews from the working groups. So it's good to see a good spread between them. In terms of where most of the reviews were coming from this time, we got a lot from IDR and MPLS. We've got quite a few from outside the routing area. Trill gaming with quite a few as well. If you're one of the working groups that didn't send any requests, then please consider whether you could get better value out of your directorate. I want to use a few minutes here to just update you all on a new process that we're using in the directorate, because this has changed in the last few months, and people here who are in the directorate will probably have noticed this, but just to remind you all what's going on. So Robert Sparks and Tiro Covenant have done some great work in integrating the tool that we use to do directorate reviews with the data tracker. And that's helping in all sorts of ways. It makes it easier and faster for people to request reviews of documents. It simplifies the way in which we, the coordinators, communicate with everyone. And it also, it has a benefit of linking a draft direct data tracker page directly with the reviews that the directorates are doing. So you can all head over there and just see exactly what reviews got done and what the results were in one place. Just to take you through how that works. First of all, if you're requesting a review, so that means you're an area director or you're a chair, what you need to do is go to the documents page in the data tracker. Quite simply, click on the request review button, which has been added. And when you click on that, it takes you to a simple menu where you can select the type, which is either early or last call or telechat. And you can sort of select which directorates you want to do the review. Take routing area directorate, set a deadline in the deadline field, add any extra comments you need to make to the coordinators, and then click submit. And then Amy and I will receive an email, and then we'll do some magic behind the scenes. And the next thing that will happen is we'll assign the review to one of the directorates. So if you're in the directorate, you will see an email like this. It will come from either me or from Amy. And it will say something like in the subject, RTGDIR, last call assignment for some draft name. And it will give a deadline and any comments, and it will give you a link. Please do not delete this email. Please do not junk filter it. Please add this sort of thing to your safe senders template so that you see these emails. You need to click on this link and tell us if you can accept the review assignment or not. If it looks like you haven't seen the email, Amy and I will try to remember to chase you. That's obviously a fallible process, so please just click on the link straight away and that will be great. It doesn't matter if you can't accept the assignment, just tell us. In terms of how you manage all the assignments we're giving you, hopefully you don't have too many at one time, but you can head over to this URL, datatracker.ietf.org/account/review, and it will tell you what reviews you currently have assigned. It will tell you which you recently did. And you can set some preferences here, like how often you want to get reviews, whether there are any particular drafts you want to be excluded from reviewing, etc., whether you want reminders from the system about the reviews you've got to do. And when you've finished a review, you just need to go to this page and click on the link, and you can submit your finished review via this page, and it will just send it to all the relevant places. If you want to look at what documents we currently have in the routing area directorate, then the new way to do that is to go to this webpage, datatracker.ietf.org/group/rtgdir/reviews, and it will list all the assigned open reviews. That's a selection of the ones from last night. It'll tell you what's to be reviewed, who's reviewing it, what the type of review is, what the deadline is. So if you're desperate to do extra work, you can go along and do that and say, oh, hey, I'd like to review that as well, and add yourself as a reviewer. It also has some history on there showing what documents got reviewed in history. And that's it. Any questions or comments?
So first of all, I would like to thank you and Amy for doing a great job.
Thanks, Jeff.
Significant improvement with regards to timing, and it's really good. So with regards to this tool, it's great to have finally everything in single place rather than sending email to young doctors, to you, to someone else. So significant improvement. I think what's missing is really ability to negotiate the dates, because we are putting date requested. Person who is accepting it kind of has to accept date I asked for. I'm open to negotiate the date if it's not available. So having this possibility would have been great.
Yeah, I think that's a feature we do need to add. Is, you know, if the deadline is movable, then we need to be able to change it. At the moment, it's kind of immutable data in the system.
So just to follow up on Jeff real quick, yes, a lot of times, at least what we request reviews is because of last call or IETF or the telechat or things like that. In those cases, we check the little box that says telechat. Those dates are non-negotiable, right? Because the telechat comes, and if you didn't turn in the review, then there's no point. But yes, besides that, I understand. There has to be some flexibility.
Especially early reviews. It's not about being done in 3 weeks. If it's 5 weeks, it's still okay.
Yeah. So I mean, the tool's just there to help, but at the end of the day, Amy and I are human beings, so and we're really running it. So we take care of that. But yeah, it would be helpful to be able to do that for certain types of review.
Andy Malice, if you can go back a couple slides to the slide that shows where you request a review. Right there. Perfect.
Right there.
Thanks. I recently used this for the first time a few weeks ago to request a review for a document in working group last call. If you look at the last call button, it's really not clear. There's just one, and it's not clear whether that's meant for working group last call or IETF last call.
Yeah.
I clicked it anyway, but I wasn't sure if I should or not. But and there actually is, and it's so there might be a need for more buttons there.
There might be, yeah. I think there are two different types of last call. My understanding is that means IETF last call, but I'm not completely sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, IETF last call is what's intended. That's when a lot of the other directorates start. And for those documents that are coming to the telechat from, say, outside the area that we think have routing context, when we're on top of things, that's when we request them.
I'll feed that straight back to Robert and Tiro, so I agree with the comment.
Right. So, but it's a radio button, so you have to choose one of them, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't fit as early.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it fits as early.
It's early.
Okay.
I think anything before IESG is early, according
Gotcha.
to
Okay,
according
so-
to the system. So it just needs better explanation
Yeah.
and
So you might
labeling.
want to get that updated. Say IESG last call.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Jeff, as one of the other things that's popped up in IDR in particular is code point squatting.
Yeah.
Basically a form of review that we do need that's sort of beyond this sort of thing. I'm not picking on that the routing directorate should do this, but this workflow is actually a good place to insert this. If you have a document that needs specific sets of eyeballs, it might be nice to actually be able to poke something here as like, hey, IDR, this is something that impacts you.
So let me see if I understand. What you're saying is not just be able to request a director review, but to also send the email to a specific working group or some other random group of people or something like that.
Or designated expert if you're doing stuff. So this is sort of triggered by IANA considerations for the most part. So I suspect.
Well, yeah, but the IANA review is separate. So the expert review in IANA triggers the expert review during last call.
Yes.
So
And the problem, unfortunately, is that's way too late. The sort of issue that we've been running into at IDR is that these things are either getting used well ahead of where we'd have any sort of formal review inside of IETF. This needs to be just basically, to give an example, we had a BMP document that came out. It's an excellent set of BMP documents, but they have code point allocations in there that they should not have done. So being able to flag, this has issues, the row to chairs need to pay attention to this and insert into their workflow as a pay attention, as early as possible would be good.
Yes, I understand. So it would be nice if you opened a ticket with the tools team to add some of that.
So some of it, I'll go on a little farther on it if that's okay, Harold, to be specific, or did you get enough and I should do this privately?
You don't need to tell me what you
understand.
want the tool to do. You need to
I
tell the tools
understand.
team
I
what
was
you
going
want
to
the tools
comment
to do.
how it can be done with the tool right now.
Okay,
Is that- Okay, so what you do is, by the way, this tool is like saved me a ton of time with 3 working groups to monitor. This is like really cool. So, and you guys are really responsive. Both you and Amy and all your, John and all the previous cohorts. 3 thumbs up if I had them.
Thanks, Sue.
Okay, so one way this can be done is when you click the early review and it says extra comments, you can say, please make sure BGP chairs or eyes see on it. Would you catch that if we put it in the extra comments?
Yeah, anything you put in the extra comments, we'll see when the system sends us an email and it has all the stuff in there. So we'll see that. And then if there's
Yeah,
any
you-
specific, like you want me to pull in extra people, then
Okay, so if we put it in there now and say, please, have everybody look at it, that might be a good, and on the next page where you go to early review, can you get, no, you don't have it up there. When you click in on early review and you start typing stuff in,
yeah.
sometime I'll send a note to the tools team, but let's try it with comments first and see if that works. Do you understand what I'm talking about? When you put in the click on early review, go into the thing, it has a whole bunch of comments underneath it. John?
Yep.
Okay, I'll put it in there for the next couple that I review. If you'd watch it, we'll see if it needs a button.
Sure. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So again, thanks to John and Amy for the great job you're doing. If any of you are in the routing directorate, can you please stand up? So we can recognize you, say, thank you, you're doing a wonderful job. Keep doing all that you're doing. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to the real lightning round. You know how this works. We're going to project the wiki. You all know the ABC, so please be ready. Don't read the screen. That's for everyone else. Make it exciting and interesting. So we want to have you come back in the future. Maybe we'll go to your meetings, all those exciting and wonderful things. So who has a working group that starts with A? No one. No. You failed the test. Yeah, I do. Yeah, there is a B and it's not you. I'm sorry, Jeff. I know you want to do this really quick, but no. Okay. There was a test to see how well everyone could spell. Okay, Bello, go.
Yeah, so Babel is first alphabetically, and there was a reasonable amount of babbling. We reviewed in fair detail what's going on with the main document, which is RSC 6126 bis, which is experimental for Babel, and which we're moving to standards track and combining some other material into. So that was really the main item at the meeting. There's also some work on the data model, and things are moving along, if not as rapidly as one might like.
Martin from BES. So sorry we don't have so many crispy stuff. Working group is rolling steadily, both in attendance and document flow. We had 3 working group last call and 2 new working group documents. Good thing, however, is that we had 2 documents that were in a dying phase because the editors had left. and some volunteers proposed to take over. So they are back on track. One of them being the MIBs. So we will have closed our MIBs. And as usual, interactions with other working groups. Recently it was IDR. Now we have one that concerns PIM and also SFC. But I think I've mentioned that in the previous meeting. Thank you.
Jeff Oz, my next working group will start with a Z, I promise. So in BFD, we have a multi-point document that we're going to try to push to RFC. It does have one implementation for a portion of it. It's just timely to be published. We're trying to get our Yang document done. This should make our people that want to actually use our module as a protocol component for other places, be able to just refer to that. That's sort of lingering on the same set of work that's holding up most of the IETF Yang work right now, including the mountain point stuff. The interesting work that we have going on is still related to our authentication stuff. We have some continuing things that we've been looking at in terms of optimizing BFD's authentication. BFD authentication with SHA, whatever is practically undeployable. That's what the security guys have been wanting, but trying to do the SHA-1s every 3.3 milliseconds on a 500 megahertz CPU where you get 1% of the CPU doesn't work so well. So there's some interesting work that was prompted by discussion with Alan Deacock, for the security stuff, specifically about fast hash algorithms that give us medium-grade security. And this may actually have interesting properties for other mechanisms such as IPFix or any other telemetry type thing. So despite the fact this is well out of your area, I actually suggest taking a look at the draft Sonal item that's inside of our agenda. Last thing of interest is that we have a BFDM lag thing for multi-chassis that we're going to be moving for adoption.
So in beer, we normally do a lot of exciting work and then we drink a lot of beer. This time we did more bean counting and drank beer. So the technical work is kind of fairly solid. Implementations are rolling. On the bean counting side, we're calling the code points for the drafts. For early allocation, we go and discuss an ether type. There was an interesting discussion about the tracks, standard tracks versus experimental. Looks like we will be wrapping up last call's experimental. People involved want rather a stable RFC than going through writing the license videotapes, actually the RFC explaining how beneficial it is, which is a precondition for the standards track. Yeah, so bean counting time and right now, deployment implementations.
Daniele for CCamp. We have a very busy week. We had our classical session on Tuesday. We will have a joint session together with CCamp, with the MPLSTs and PCE on Friday. And we had a side meeting dedicated to FlexE, a new topic in our area. Actually, it was a side meeting hosted by CCamp. So all the material, slides, minutes are available under the CCamp page. Talking about the highlights of the working group, we have two design teams ongoing. One particularly focused on microwave and millimeter waves. The first draft, the framework has been adopted as working group, and we have the first version of the Yang model available. We received a lot of comments, both from the working group and other standardization bodies, which is good. And we have also another design team for the definition of the NBI for transport SDM controllers. The first draft is available. It's pretty new design team. We kicked it off after last meeting. A lot of Yang models, most of which have been recently updated. WSON with impairment validation, FlexiGrid, IP over WDM, layer 1 topology, and so on and so forth. New work, FlexE, as I said, for the side meeting. And the new latest update on G709, the V5, which is also known as beyond the 100 gigabit. Summary, we have one ID in the editor queue, one ID in post-working group last call, which was put on hold because of dependency on this document, which is now ready, and we can progress.
I'd like to add that the CCAMP did an article for the IETF journal on the microwave design team. It's in this issue, so that was really good.
I want a T-shirt.
Oh, you want it? So that's good incentive for all of you to really think about, to do it. It's not too big a deal. It doesn't have to be a whole research paper. So you should check it out, and it would give lots of visibility for us here in the routing area. So think about some new topics or whatever that you're working on to put there.
The other commercial I want to make is one of the discussions this week in the ASG was about publicizing more, like in social media and things like that, when we get to big milestones. New RFCs, not just any new RFC, but something that we think is meaningful, very meaningful. We're obviously going to be looking out for stuff, but if you guys have things that we may miss, please point them out so that we can publicize a little bit more of the ATF work outside the ATF.
Okay, so DetNet, I think the big news this week is we have a data plane solution draft, and they're going to roll that draft, and we hope to get that adopted as a working group draft before Prague. We've got the architecture draft, which we feel with the data plane draft progressing, we're ready to start that towards RFC. And we have our other early foundational documents, the problem statement and just data plane alternatives that we're also going to start progression on towards RFC, so moving them towards last call. And good progress this week.
Thanks. R2S. R2S has been really aided by NetConf, RESTConf. We've been scheduling all of our discussions, so I wanted to publicly thank folks from NetConf, from NetMod and NetConf. It appears the thing that people are most interested to hear about is the topology model. It appears that the revised data store concept basic is going to go forward, so the topology model will probably use that and go back to working group last call. Hopefully that will help the rest of you. We're working through how do we get the protocol and the Yang stuff with the NetMod. So I think we made good progress this time. We did have the problem of what happens to be after lunch when people get a really good working group chairs lunch. We had a lot of somnolent participants, but a lot of people came back and gave us comments on the list. Good show. Thank you, Joe Clark and all the rest, and Phil. Okay, IDR. I'm next, so unless John has a leaping desire to jump up. So our major topics are updates to prevent attitude, well, probably attitude squatting, but attribute squatting is perhaps better. And we're going to talk about it. Jeff went through some of the things. We do our famous updates. Read it. Next. If you'd scroll down, it'll help me remember what I was supposed to say. Thank you. We have a lot of interesting new work. You'll notice we've got things about border roles that might help the route leak problem. We have, yet again, how to discover your BGP peers in multiple forms. We have service routing, and we have how to compress your update, which I really wonder what will happen with the presentations if we start compressing updates. More oscillation. So please enjoy us. Friday's always a fun day.
I think this looks like that.
Yay, Friday. So,
Yeah, so the highlights is pretty much, we've got some interest in spine leaf topologies. I think there's a presentation even in routing working group today, probably because they want it to be seen. And we pretty much, I think, are getting to be done on the Yang. We have AutoConf, and that's pretty much done. I don't think we've gotten any comments in the last call that are going to block it. The MI-BIS, once again, I don't know of any comments on this one or where it's at in the RFC state, but basically it just adds multi-topology to the multi-instance ISIS work. We have a lot of individual documents out there, 13 actually, and I can't really go through all of those. We have one more thing. I think there's the desk source routing has been in a working group adoption call since like October of last year. And primarily the reason we haven't pulled the trigger on that is because there's not a lot of excitement in any direction. You know, the authors support it. Tony P said he thinks he supports it, and Les says he doesn't know tell me who wants to use it. So if anybody, wants to add their opinion in, it might help move this forward. And that's it.
None of my chairs for LTTP okay. So they did not meet, and they finally got the IPv6 document done. So that's been approved for publication, and they have one other document in the queue now that they're working on. It's the Yang model. Lisp.
Hi. So for Lisp, we will meet this afternoon in the first session. And yeah, we are moving steadily forward. We published 3 different RFC on the encoding of the addresses, confidentiality for the data plane, meaning basically encrypting the data flow. And we also created a IANA registry for the message types that we have. So we have another document for which we just requested the publication, which is LispSec, which adds some security features to the mapping system, very important in public deployments. And we have one document in working group last call, which is the Lisp signal-free multicast solution. Now, the main working item for this afternoon will be a discussion about 68, 30 bis and 30 bis. So basically these are the 2 main specs concerning the data plane and control plane of Lisp. The original RFCs are experimental, so we are moving to standard track, so that's why we have the bis version. And then we have a bunch of new works, so I would say individual submission right now. We will see how we move forward concerning mobility, traffic engineering, using blockchains for the mapping system, and anonymity for the EIDs and VPNs.
Hi, Stan Ratliff here with MENA. We've got a couple of documents in the process, OLSR2 security threats in Office 48, and then our DLEP draft for router to modem statistics has cleared last call. We're meeting in the second session this afternoon. We're going to talk about some more extensions for the DLEP protocol. And we're also trying to get a discussion restarted on multicast in these mobile networks. So if that topic interests you, please come help us at 3 o'clock.
So MPLS, we have 2 sessions. One was already on Tuesday, in fact at 9 o'clock, not 9:50. The other one will be tomorrow at 9. It will be a joint session with TEAS, MPLS, CCAMP, and PCE. There are still some slides missing, so just please send your slides. Highlights, we have one new RFC. It's on detecting data failure planes and MPLS. Altogether about 50 new or updated IDs. I think 7 are presented on Tuesday, or 6. And there's the draft on linear protection that is submitted for publication.
I'm Matthew Bocci for MVO3. We've got 2 sessions this week. One was on Tuesday afternoon, and we've got another one this afternoon, today. We've had one new RFC since the last IETF. That's the MVO3 architecture, RFC 8014. But the 2 really exciting things this week are that we have a data planning encapsulation design team that has, after many years of discussion around 3 different encapsulation designs in the working group, has recommended draft IETF MVO3 Geneve to be taken forward in MVO3. And they have a draft which we will do a working group adoption call on, and that will really be the test of working group consensus, I guess, on that choice. We also held a virtual interim meeting at the beginning of March to review these recommendations from the design team. And as Ilya mentioned earlier on, we are experimenting, again this IETF, with roundtable discussions in the working group to try and get some more kind of active discussion around some of the technical issues, and hopefully generate some drafts into the working group based on that. And on Tuesday, we had sessions on control plane, security, and data plane, and the report back from that is going to be in the afternoon session today. Thanks.
AC Lindum. We're only meeting once this week, and it's immediately after lunch today. We're finally getting, I think we're ready for OSPF V2 segment routing to be working group last called. We really want to put a cap on any more changes to this and get it published. We've had 2 iterations of early IANA, so under that OSPF Yang model, that's going to be presented today. We're pretty close content-wise. We got some questions open based on whether we should do anything based on the revised data store, but you can come and listen to that. OSPF v3 LSA extensions, there may be an implementation in works, and I'm trying to get a co-author that's associated with that implementation, so I'm really optimistic on that. And we have a discussion this week. Thanks, I don't know if he's in the room, Stefan from Orange put together the meeting, and I think we have a agreement on all the authors of all the entropy label signaling drafts, at least one co-author from all of them on the precise definition of when the count, the RLD, and everything like that. So I think we can move forward with those drafts. That's good. It turned out the MSD, we already agreed on that. That was pretty simple, so we could probably move forward on that. And we have some ongoing discussions on attributed advertisements. We have 2 new RFCs and probably about a half dozen drafts in working group close, very close to working group last call, maybe before the next IETF. I'm hoping we'll either working group last call them or decide to terminate the work. That's it.
So PALS is getting very close to the end of its current work list. Well, I think we've got, if we go down a bit, I can't remember how many we've got left. I think it's just 1 left to finish, really. 1, 2, 3 left to finish. No, most of those are with the ISG or with the AD, so it leaves us fairly soon. We've got no other documents in the queue, so the question we have to ask is there's some potential work associated with the DETnet design, deterministic networking design team. Whether that's coaching for them or whether that's documents in our working group are yet to be determined. There is one other document that we need to publish. There's been reports of a problem that was very well known, actually, since the first day we considered designing an Ethernet pseudowire, and that was the issue of an alias between an IP packet and a pseudowire and an Ethernet address. When we wrote it, the thought was that we were never going to see one of these things because of the sort of structured way that the addresses were handed out. Well, apparently they are becoming more prevalent in terms of observations by network operators, and so we should really write some advice some deployment advice about using the control word, and there are a couple of other mitigations that we can suggest. So that's a high priority document to produce.
Julian.
Julien Muric, Pass Computation Element Working Group. PC met on Monday with its usual session dedicated to the usual PC work. And we are also involved in the joint meeting tomorrow morning with MPLS, CKAMP, and TIS about young models. So please come if you're interested. So the PC working group had a tight agenda again, various proposals connected to the applicability of, is that the latest version you're printing? Not sure. Various proposals related to applicability to ECTN, hierarchical PC, and so on. We have also various extensions concerning PCEP for different use cases, some relying on associations or for enhancement related to time information, performance. There is also a base in progress, which is moving quite fast because the discrepancies were properly identified and it should be sent to the IESG pretty soon. And of course, the work in progress on the young model as usual. We have a new RFC since the last meeting, and the good news is that we may expect up to 5 new ones till the next meeting. 2 of them are blocked due to the dependence to the following ones. The 3 ones which are with the IESG have been through, 2 of them have been through. The third one is with the Rtgarea reviews, and they are all connected to the stateful PC extensions, which is a huge achievement from the PC working group. And it may deserve that I volunteer Jonathan to write something for the journal, or to appoint someone, maybe. And we have also other drafts that are passed, that have passed last call, and that should be ready to be sent to the IETF soon. Thanks.
Yes, congratulations on stateful PCE finally progressing. And the journal article would be an excellent idea.
Yeah, Stig Vanas from PIM. Don't have that much to add, I think, but we published an RFC since the last meeting. We're doing a lot of work on Yang. So we have a PIM model that is finished, we hope. It's already submitted for publication. There are some dependencies on other routing Yang models, other drafts. So if those change, we may have to do changes in our model too, but so hoping to get some help from ISG to verify that those models are aligned and so on. We're also almost ready with the IGMP MLD model. We just want to do a couple of small changes and hopefully submit it for publication in a few weeks. Well, we need to do a last call first too. We also adopted an MSDP draft, and we think we should be able to get that done pretty quick. There's also, apart from Yang, there's some PIM source discovery draft that will probably go to last call in a few weeks, and have a couple of drafts that haven't really been updated and a couple of IETFs. We need to push the authors and make some progress on those. And we also had some presentation on a new potential work item. We'll see how that goes. And yeah, we already met on this Tuesday.
Hi, we meet today in the afternoon. We have a new charter since December last year, so we have new work ongoing. Some work will require like a review from other working groups like MANET or PIM. We have routing dispatch work in RFC editor queue. We are in working groups last call for use cases of Ripple information. That's it. Thank you very much.
Routing, we are meeting twice a week with agent presentation. We could have met 3 times. Highlights, young work is progressing really great tempo. DT is extremely productive. We are getting 5 or 6 drafts ready for working group last call. We've got new secretary in GenQ. 2 main teams besides regular work yesterday, young and really fostering the dialogue with the industry. So I've invited representation from OpenConfig to talk about existing issues and how we can possibly work together. Today, besides in regular presentations, we are having 4 different solutions for routing in data center. So a lot of interesting stuff. Pretty much it. And keychain draft is, after many iterations, finally ready to proceed.
SFC? Teacher over here, so perhaps.
So unfortunately, Joel and Jim aren't here. SFC had a good discussion. They had a very productive interim meeting in January with focuses on a number of pieces, including trying to finish up NSH. One of the action items from there is adding a TTL into NSH, because otherwise bad things can happen with reclassifiers. And there's a few other aspects related to that, discussing how to progress the OAM work. And that's going to be coordinated with some of what's happening in NVO3, for instance, and elsewhere. Control plane. So BESS has recently adopted a BGP extensions document that talks about how to use BGP to set up and manipulate service change, and that's great. A question is understanding the gaps and other approaches. There is also a presentation related to that around how to pull information. You know, what do service functions need to have for control points and so on. So that's useful, but there's still a lot of discussion around what to do for control planes. The control planes requirements document is not, the structure and abstract presentation of it is not looking like it's going to be a very productive approach. So we're looking for ideas there. Cider?
Sandy Murphy reporting for CIDR. CIDR did not meet at this IETF, but there was discussion of CIDR topics at the CIDR Ops meeting. I gave the status of the drafts. It's dwindling down to a very few. There are 9 that have been approved through the ISG and are in the RFC editor's queue. There's 6 drafts still in the working group. 1 is past ISG and is commenting, resolving some issues raised in the discuss. 2 are not yet through AD evaluation, one of which was one of Alvaro's significant reviews. 1 is a recently updated and is now ready for working group last call, and 2 are expired. Another significant portion of the CIDR Ops meeting was overtaken by a discussion of the BGP protocol draft's reliance on the IDR extended messages draft, which is pushed back to the IDR working group for some more work. And there were questions, various opinions expressed. Do we care? Can we just wait for the extended messages draft to get through? If we don't want to wait, in fear that it wouldn't, what sort of changes are necessary, and what do you do if you exceed the message size in the current BGP world, and what sort of implementations, how do they behave in that case if they're about to, in the current BGP, exceed the message size, what would they do with BGPsec? So not clear what the consensus is going to be with that. So that was it.
So spring met on Tuesday. We made important progress. More specifically, we have reached the challenging objective we had set for Seoul by sending a 7 document to ISG. So many thanks to the working group reviewers, authors, and shapers. For next steps, we have a couple of documents remaining, working group documents, and we expect to working group last calls them soon. And we are starting opening the discussion for the next step of spring, and we'll continue the discussion on the list.
Pawan Bera for TEAS. We had a regular session on Monday. There's also this joint session tomorrow that the other chairs talked about. Please don't go home without attending this meeting. As far as highlights are concerned, the Yang work is progressing quite well. There are a fair number of modules that are fairly mature, so the next step would be to get them ready for last call. As far as the documents under the ACTN umbrella are concerned, there's a new addition to the working group document list. The info model document just got adopted. The PC central control architecture document is almost ready for last call, and the corresponding use cases document also just got adopted. In terms of document status, we have 1 new RFC. There's 1 in the RFC ATS queue, 1 for which we just put in a publication request, and we also had 4 new adoptions.
Trill has been very gratefully, oh, can I just go back? The IDR working group will be discussing, Sandy, the extended messages at IDR. So if you catch us, I think we're coming to a good conclusion, but that'll be part of the chair's report. So if you need to go there. Okay, Trill. Trill has got a challenge we need to talk about with our ADs. In that our Yang models are deployed, and we were waiting online, but it looks like the deployed Yang models win, surprising. But I guess deployment really matters, so we've got to face that challenge and decide what to do with our Yang models. Hopefully forward them through since they're being used. They don't fit the current Yang model structure, and I'm overscheduled all you Yang folks on Friday because IDR was scheduled across from the Yang models. We've got some potential new drafts in the new encoding of fine-grained models, parent distribution. We're really focusing on what is needed for deployments right now and closing all of our work to see if there's anything that we have to do. We finished our active. We finished our directory assisted information. We've got most of our multi-level up and at least having a fairly good work. We have most of our multi-topology. So we've gone through most of our good work. We're planning to put the existing documents and minimize new work. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. We have about 12 minutes left. If anyone has anything else you want to bring up, any business from the area, structure, complaints, claims, compliments are preferred.
Short one. So those of you who are working on young models are not going to net mode. We are going to produce new recommendation how new young models should be structured with regards to upstate and structure of the model. So pay attention. And again, it's only for the new ones that start to be designed. So we don't expect to change all ones, but it's quite important.
Yes, on that topic of Yang, we've been talking vigorously with our chairs about how to encourage and progress Yang models. We'd like to see them moving along. It is useful to progress a set of them that have the necessary interactions, and it is really nice to have implementations of them associated with it. We're going to be aiming at recommendations that make sense for what we think the target of getting these done, or at least a good number of them done, is going to be. This is kind of a random question for you all, since we've had so many cheerful comments about meetings on Friday. And since we've been having more side meetings coming up and making the week even busier, should we be looking at having a longer meeting time on Friday?
So I think that Friday's just kind of fun to make fun of. I mean, you know, to be honest, the ISI's people, most of them will be there. I might lose a couple. If I got slotted Friday every single IETF, I might object. But it doesn't. I mean, if we need to extend it the whole day, that's fine. But I don't mind.
Well, the question is trade-offs. For instance, Berlin, I think it was, we did meeting time starting at 10 a.m. and people seem to appreciate having the freedom of the earlier slot. And so if one thinks about trying to add more slots in, and yet we still have the same number of meeting requests, there's only so many ways of doing that, unless anyone can slow down the earth so we have a few more hours.
I think we should do whatever it takes, which, as far as I'm concerned, if it means meeting on Sunday and Friday, that's just fine. What I am concerned about is the number of overlaps that we have that are significant, because many of us follow more than one working group and have quite diverse portfolios in our with our employers or clients. So I think we need to do a bit better at deconflicting than we've been doing.
That was Stuart Bryant. Yes, you missed the very important chairs lunch yesterday. We had a conversation about conflicts, and we agreed, I'm going to send an email to the chairs anyways. We agreed on trying to consistently formalize how we declare conflicts, so that one of the first criteria is going to be obviously technology type conflicts, so that we make sure that we have a clear view of what exactly is conflicting with other working groups, etc., so that when the scheduling is done, we can actually do the right thing. Stephanie from the Secretariat was there yesterday, and so, or Tuesday actually at the lunch, and so she explained to us how the scheduling is done, how in fact she gives priority to the routing area, because we're the ones with the most requests and the most conflicts. And the most important, of course, she didn't say that, but I think so. Can I get a hum on most important? Come on, some of you didn't hum? Who here is spying from the art area? No, okay, so yes, we need to make sure that not only the right conflicts are expressed, but that they're expressed consistently. Right now, there's a lot of inconsistencies. Working groups point in one direction, not the other direction. We need to find out exactly what that is. So look forward to an email to the routing chairs, Elias.
Thank you. Well, I apologize for missing the routing chairs meeting. That was because I was in a side meeting, one of about 4 or 5 I've had this week, resulting in almost no meal times, either in the middle or the end of the day. So
I would say I feel bad for you, but I
so-
don't.
I mean, it's probably good for you, but but the point is that there's no longer any slack space in the agenda at all for anything other than going to meetings. So that's why we need to try and somehow or other stretch it.
Yes, that is an ongoing discussion in the ASG on how we do this. Unfortunately, one of the things is either what Leah said, extend the meeting on Friday, for example. The other thing that varies a lot, which makes it really hard to just say solve it this way, is that room availability and distribution, all that stuff varies per venue. So we may have more rooms here. We may, I don't know what's going to happen next time, and et cetera. So we need to figure out other solutions. There have been, if you've been paying attention to the plenary over not last night, but the other IETFs, people suggesting other things. For example, only blocks of 1 hour throughout the day, and force more focused meetings around the day. Have little pieces in between where some of the conflicts should be distributed across. Longer requests would mean more meetings, right? So there's different things that we can try. This is one of the topics that we always have in all the ISG discussions. In May, we're going to have the ISG retreat. We're going to go somewhere and not come out for 3 days. And this is going to be one of the topics, of course. How do we make more time? How do we deal with all these side meetings so that not only we have time to go to the side meetings, we don't care about lunch, but all the side meetings, and so that we draw good divisions or good differentiation between side meetings and actual BOFs or working groups and things along those lines.
Andy Malice, I don't mind extending all the day through Friday as long as we know well enough in advance so we can make our airplane reservations accordingly.
So on the topic of Friday, do you think, well, I know you can't answer this, but do we think we're losing the new blood? Do you think they're leaving early? Yeah, because I thought about my answer earlier and it said, all the ISIS folks I expect are there, but maybe not new ISIS folks. On that, to answer that, maybe could we add a way to somehow figure out when people are leaving? Like, we have a survey I think we send out to all the attendees later. Maybe a question is, what day did you leave? So we can find out maybe when we're losing everybody.
Yeah, we'll talk to the secretary about that. Yes.
Sandy Murphy. On another sort of coordination topic, one of the things that was discussed at the working group chair lunch, brought to mind by me comparing the routing area's way of getting all the working group reports with the security area way. GitHub has been suggested as a wonderful way of doing collaborative sort of development. I have my own concerns about it, but I don't know what the working group chairs in the routing area is there the way that the sort of work that the routing area is doing and the sorts of topics that we address, is there a reason to think that it would be more or less benefit for routing area working groups? That was a question for the audience. But you can answer too.
Well, I'm more interested in hearing what other people think. But I can tell you that I went to the BOF about working groups using GitHub and co-authored one of the documents there. I think that there are several pieces going on. One is, it is so, so nice not to get text, old, new, and have to go hunt it down and then figure it out and then make your changes and reply. It speeds the mechanic. So the tool of doing version control and such speeds things up, and there's useful tools there. There's also an aspect with GitHub of outreach, if you will, that you can get drive-by comments and reviews. I'm not sure how much that would apply in routing. I'd be interested in seeing feedback from folks who have documents in GitHub where they might get them, or Yang. I certainly think that we're open to discussion and experimentation if there's interest. But I think it's important to make the distinction of what are we, if we put things into GitHub, what would we be putting them into GitHub for? And it doesn't have to be the same answer for each group or each document or each person.
I said I had concerns. My concern is, as working group chair, trying to, if the comments that are arriving in the mailing list and in GitHub and in any of the other third-party things, I think I suffer.
Right. So do take a look at the documents. Some of their different styles of working with GitHub, where you can have the comments and pull requests forwarded to the mailing list. Now, some working groups like HTTP BIS found that that was too large a volume to the mailing list, given I would tend to send things to the mailing list as well until we discover that there's an overload problem.
So with the rise in the number of public, i.e. open to any person in the IETF unofficial meetings, I wonder if there should be a list or a website or a something or other, so that those of us who weren't in the sort of scheduling loop can figure out that, gosh, that's interesting, I ought to go there, particularly as I might be interested in it being a BOF sometime soon.
Stuart, I can tell that you're missing those wonderful breakfast meetings because this topic has come up exactly. So the question is, if you have some type of a shared calendar for the side meetings, I mean, it has everything to do with being clear on what are side meetings of individuals that are trying to have things open versus, and really doing the outreach, trying to get the word out and get input in, versus what are official working groups, and making sure that those distinctions are clear. Because while most people are coming and acting in very good faith, there are always examples of desires to overclaim consensus and agreement on progressing work.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe as simple as IETF 98 side meetings or something or other at IETF.org.
Yes, we're talking about it, but good to hear the idea from you too. Well, that was awesome. We managed to fill up the last 15 minutes with actual conversation. Thank you. This was really helpful. Have a great rest of the IETF. It's wonderful to see you all.
We should make a note of that, and when we talk about the retreat, and just throw it out.